the Corona showed us that there's a lot more to do on the digital front for government, for banking, for many other segments. But it's also showed that we as humans should focus more on sustainability.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to a whole new episode of your favorite CX show, the Engati CX show. And I'm your host, Rahul, and today we have an artificial intelligence expert with us on the show. But before I introduce you to our guest, let me introduce you to the magic of Engati. Engati is the world's leading multilingual no-code chatbot platform available across 14 channels, with 35,000 bots created across 186 countries in every domain and use case. Engati has also been recognized as a top platform by Inc.com, Tech World, CIO, and many others. We run the Engati blog, the video channel, and the Engati CX podcast, of course, which you guys love so much, which is receiving upwards of 400,000 visitors annually. And now for our guest, the amazing Micheal Berns is on the show. Now, he is the director of AI and Fintech leader at PwC. Micheal Berns is a thought leader and expert in innovation, digital transformation, artificial intelligence, and fintech. He spent more than a decade leading engagements with Fortune 500 companies before then disrupting that space with innovation solutions after his executive MBA at London Business School. Micheal has a broad background across blue chip names such as Morgan Stanley and Moody's, as well as a range of smaller innovative AI firms. As a well-known expert in his field, Micheal acts as keynote speaker at international conferences and guest lecturer at London Business School with focus on AI and fintech. So welcome to the show, Mike. It's such an honor to have you on board.
Great to be here, Rahul. Thank you for having me.
Appreciate that. So jumping into this first question straight up, and I think this is very interesting because I haven't heard about this before. So what exactly do you mean by responsible AI? What's it all about?
I mean, for me personally, I started my journey into AI first as a startup mentor some 9 years ago, being based in London, where a lot of companies came into the European market and towards expansion and so on. Some of them more from China, some of them more from the US. And that was kind of like the first wave, taking AI serious, kind of using the new infrastructure and the new systems in terms of availability of data and so on to set it up. I think what we are seeing at PwC globally is that now that a lot of companies have implemented their first use cases and are looking at this AI thing, what is next? What should they be thinking about? And so on our side, we created a responsible AI framework to kind of have some additional things to consider. So it's not just, can you build me a AI solution, which is pretty much what a lot of my clients came to me some 7 years ago, just build something with artificial intelligence. It's now more, I'm thinking about this use case. Should I be using machine learning for that? And then how do I set this up in a way that there is potentially less bias? How do I kind of have a view on this that is from an ethical point of view? How do I set my governance framework around this so that everything that I do in that space is not getting out of control and then harming the reputation of the company, maybe harming some of the data privacy laws. So just being aware that this is all cutting edge technology, but it's up to us how we use it. And if we do use it, we should use it within a ethical and controlled framework.
Right. So you mean to say it's more about being a little bit more mindful about using AI all in general?
Yes, it's not more anymore like, what is this new thing? And I definitely want to get started with artificial intelligence no matter what. It's more, how do I set this up so it can be sustainable? How do I go about choosing use cases that are ethical? How do I create the right culture in the team, and so on. So there's a lot more elements to that. The framework on the toolkit is available on the PwC homepage for anyone to kind of have a look at and think. And when it comes to Germany, for example, my colleagues are working on like some guidelines from a audit point of view for AI as well. So kind of after a system has been implemented, what are the things that should be checked, also using algorithms in terms of how the system reacts and how stable it is, how robust it is, and how biased it is really. So
That
it's not
sounds
just a mental framework or a questionnaire. It can be a lot more than this in terms of the toolkit, where there's sections where you can apply some software and really do some tests on the code that you've provided and the implementation itself.
right. Yeah, it sounds really interesting because I think there are a lot of factors coming in when we are actually practicing this. But I think, Michael, the biggest question right here is obviously because we are all businesses watching the show. So, what are the economic benefits of practicing responsible AI?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I have to explain to a lot of clients has changed over the years, but I think I now pretty much got everyone understanding what it really means. And it doesn't mean it's 100% accurate. It doesn't mean that it's a replacement of humans necessarily. It can be a refocus. And so the economic benefit of AI is much more clear to businesses than it was some years ago. So some years ago, it was more, let some other people play with this. We're just watching from the sidelines. Now we've seen how some major financial institutions have transformed themselves using AI, whether in US or China or elsewhere, and the economic benefits are clear. What hasn't been so clear to many people was more that in order to reap the benefits, all the homework that you have to do upfront in terms of getting the data ready, getting the systems ready, building your own Spark or Hadoop cluster, getting the data quality right, getting the team together, setting the right culture. So there's still a lot of hurdles of setting it up correctly, but let's say there's more known in terms of how you want to do it in a successful way. So now when we are clear on the economic benefits of AI, even though it's not always a quick win, right? It depends on the use case and the institution. But those are clear. For the responsible AI, I think this comes from the long-term thinking, this comes from the sustainability aspects, but also from the ethical aspects. If you create something that is acceptable to, let's say, European data privacy standards, you might have seen how the rules have changed in California, for example, recently in terms of tightening down on data privacy as well. Maybe not fully down in the European or even German direction, but the world is looking not only for the kind of every information is available, but keeping some sections private. And I think if you implement something to that standard, it will be acceptable for a wide range of countries. You could compare it with the way, for example, that the German government has decided to implement the Corona contacting app. When you look at the international feedback received, it was with minimal impact on data privacy, with minimal kind of taking data out of context, and yet providing a service that is useful to mankind and will reduce the chance of people catching this or being unaware that there's some danger nearby. So it's not easy. It's an additional hurdle that you have to take into consideration when implementing AI. But I think it's worth it for the long term, really.
Got it. Yeah. Well, this gets me to one of the most important questions I think. So, what should you really keep in mind while trying to create an AI system that are free of prejudices and biases? Because I think this is one of the problems that a lot of organizations have been facing: the AI prejudice or the AI bias. So, what are your takes on that?
I can give you some examples from my past life when we were looking to build a automatic solution for recruitment. I mean, first we looked at what hiring decisions were made over the last few years. Can we find any interview notes? And then kind of comparing this to a system where let's say the intake wasn't pre-filtered. And then you realized this legal firm that we were working with at the time, even in their pre-selection, they had some bias in their own system. Yeah, even before they're looking to automate the later steps. And so we talked to them about it and said, well, in the past, the the white male is the stereotype for this profession and for this section of the market, and therefore, in terms of the interviews, you will find very little data on females or minorities and so on. So then what we did is we implemented a system that made the early stages of the selection for them, so they didn't even have to look at the candidates, and then showed them the details without disclosing race or gender, and we saw how they would react, right? And then over time, explaining this, over time saying that, we want the Ivy League, we want the good universities, we want these and these certifications, we want this progression, we want maybe some international LMA, some other things with this. This is all criteria to make this candidate successful. And I think once the system then, after some kind of retraining, had put enough really good female and minority candidates in front of them, eventually they start seeing the light. But I think this is a case where there was enough data because they had kept close look on the past few years. We could get started. It's very difficult, like if you start with a new use case and you don't have any data whatsoever and you're just experimenting, then you might not even see the bias till much, much, much later. So it's kind of like being open-minded from the beginning of what you find, realizing always that data will always be a compromise. Either you don't have enough of it or it's not good quality yet, then you might have to use a number of different approaches, from some supervised learning, semi-supervised, or few learning shots. So it depends. Yeah, not all of them are suitable to even detect bias to kind of really prove with significant results and so on. So for me, kind of the lessons there is you should have a use case that you believe will scale and where you get your return of the investment and all the things we just discussed. Ideally, then you can prove in the data that there is either some bias or you find some way to exclude it. But because all of these processes out there, they have so many different, no process is just like one or two steps, it's always like 5 or 6. So be aware that you will not see everything, and be aware that maybe the bias even happens before the machine gets to see the data. Yeah? So you have to really think holistically for this, and then kind of go outside of the areas of typical machine learning or data science, just to really look at the entire process. That then quickly becomes more a, let's say, typical strategy consulting or management consulting role, where you look at the overall processes and the setup and the governance around this, and then take this all into account, rather than just doing an optimization on a specific data set or things that lead up to that. So it's not like a quick fix or something where you can just say, if you do those 3 things, it will always be fine. It's always a challenge. Unless you understand the full picture, all the pieces of the puzzle, I'm not sure you can fully exclude bias, even with the best system in the world. That is still only probably solving a part of the overall solution. We don't have the general AI yet, which acts like a human and can do anything, right? It's always you create a point solution, you create a niche solution, something that is very smart with one problem, but not very good with others. And maybe a human being in that situation would see, well, we exclude the bias here, but everything that happens afterwards, or the follow-up interviews, or the engagement after, is different for those types of candidates. So it could go in a lot of different ways.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's not a one size fit all. I mean, it has different branches and different ways it can operate, for sure. Very insightful. Well, moving on to my next question, and I think this is also one of the most important questions that has to be asked in today's day and age, is that how can AI be used for socially responsible initiatives?
So for me, I used to work globally out of London for 17 years, and I've now been back in Germany for about 2 years. This kind of combination of ESG and AI came up around the time when I was leaving London, that a number of companies had started to look into this, to say, we know we don't have perfect data, and we know that the rules are not there yet. Yeah, when you look for socially responsible or you look for ESG, there's a lot of different standards. There's different consulting papers out there. There's different kind of audits you can do, but the approach is still not unified. And in order to unify it, you need to have much better data quality than we have today. So even 2 years ago, it was a text mining job to really get to the bottom of some of the company releasing information on this. But it was also a role where the one with the most number of data sets from alternative sources, be it satellite data on factory production, on oil production and other things, would have a lot more than just collecting the environmental reports from those companies, right? And it's still, even now, over the last 2 months, particularly during Corona, I've interviewed a number of companies in that space. I've taken part in global webinars. It's still very much a hot topic. This combination of AI and the ESG is just really, the Corona showed us that there's a lot more to do on the digital front for government, for banking, for many other segments. But it's also showed that we as humans should focus more on sustainability. And I think this is a very powerful combination where AI can just help to sift through vast amounts of data, most of it not relevant, but then picking up some important pieces. I personally hope that there will be a more global standard on this, and that there will be better data that will make it easier to prove this, and so that some questions can be answered in black and white, and where there's no kind of open-endedness on clarification how social responsible some companies behave in that segment. What I also want to mention here is, maybe you've seen this also in the news globally, that some of the largest asset managers, in terms of BlackRock, others, have started putting pressure on companies that have bad social responsibility rating and bad sustainability ratings in terms of investments, and they're slowly but surely pushing the boards to take those things more into account. And then it's the oil producers and others that are now admitting that the oil has peaked in terms of the value, and they need to look into other sources for their own good long term, right? So this is a very interesting combination, and I think that we will still be talking on this in a couple of years, just because it will take a long time for the data to catch up on this.
Absolutely. I think we are building on this slowly, and probably in the near future, maybe we will have something that is good enough data to kind of go ahead with this in a full scale. Well, this was a fantastic conversation, Micheal, and you have put in so many fresh insights and so much information out there. Before we close out, are there any other thoughts that you'd like to leave our audience with?
I would really hope that the crisis that we've seen will all make us think in terms of how can we use AI and automation for the good. What are the kind of really important cases that we need to solve now for the next months and near time to come? How can we help the governments? How can we help the companies that have been suffering from this by using innovation and innovative solutions? Maybe not all have AI in them. Yeah, I'm fine with that. But I think we all should have gotten the message. We need to be able to do business digital, and we need to be very flexible when it comes to lockdown and so on, to offer different channels and different means to be available, to process government paper, to process bank statements, so many different things, right? So I think the message is clear, but we need to take things serious when it comes to the environment, when it comes to sustainable and responsible kind of building solutions with that, not only with AI.
Absolutely. Well, there you have it, guys. Michael Berns with a very important message out there. You got to be mindful about the way you use AI and be more mindful about things other than just technology and business. There's so much to this, and maybe this will help us. The pandemic has taught us a very difficult lesson, if I must say, but I think this is only for us to get stronger in the future. So, thank you so much, Michael, for giving us your time. Your insights have really been valuable. I know that our audience are really going to enjoy the show.
Thank you, Rahul. Pleasure to be on here.
Appreciate that. And to all the other guys, we have a very special webinar that is coming out. It is with Dennis Wakabayashi. He is one of the experts in AI, and we'll be talking about how to kind of solve complex customer queries that come through. And all the details about the webinar will be available in the description. So make sure you check that out and register for your seats as soon as possible, because it's Engati webinar. It's going to be really fun. So see you guys there, and we'll be back with a new episode and a brand new expert soon. So stay tuned, and we'll see you around for the next one. Thank you so much, Michael.